do curso de Desenho Urbano da Universidade. Eles trabalharam sobre Santa Cruz. O Guilherme, que é professor da FRJ, também participou desse estúdio. Agora, no ano que vem, vai acontecer uma nova colaboração dessas, que vai ser sobre as águas do Rio Paraíba do Sul. A gente tem conversado sobre como desenvolver isso. E a Petra, enfim, ofereceu ministrar esse workshop aqui. Enfim, eu acho que a maioria de vocês são alunos da FRJ, se eu não me engano. E, além, enfim, ela tem doutorado na Universidade de Karlsruhe, trabalhou há muito tempo seja com entes públicos como entes privados, como Richard Meier, trabalhou na Prefeitura de Nova York, e aqui ela vai apresentar o tema You Are the City, sobre planejamento participativo e instrumentos de visualização, que, para quem não é do workshop, é o tema do workshop que ela está ministrando aqui. Bem-vinda, Petra. Welcome.
Thank you, Pedro. So I have no idea what you just said about me, and what you said, what we did. So I'm just gonna say maybe something's double. So the lecture that I'm gonna give today is part of a workshop that I've been giving since Monday, and the project that I'm going to talk about today is about this project, and we already looked at it a little bit, our group, earlier today. So I'm gonna give a little bit of an introduction afterwards in the lecture, but I'm gonna just dive into the process of You Are the City. Okay? So, and for those of you who are part of the workshop, some of the things that I'm going to talk now, you already heard on Monday, so it's going to be repetitive. So please bear with me, okay? Okay. So, first slide. So, the landscape of the urban construct is an everyday intervention. It is mirrored and informed by the imprints we leave while passing through. Next slide. Imprints that form an intricate pattern of journeys and passages in which each of us create our own path with our very own point of view. Can you hear me? Not loud enough?
Make it louder.
Better? Better? Ooh. Yeah, you have issues? Those good now? Yeah? You can hear me? Okay, good. So, next slide. Yet interpretations of cities such as those of bureaucratic institutions in the sector of planning or urban design still apply the plan, the top-down snapshot, as a primary mode of presenting the urban construct, allowing the happenings of everyday life to slip silently through the cracks of our daily routine. Next slide. The spirit of a city can by no means be mastered or restrained, or even represented from a single point of view. As urbanists such as Raoul Bunschoten, Bernhard Tschumi, and Rem Koolhaas, the sociologists Henri Lefebvre, Pierre de Bourdieu, or philosophers such as Michel de Certeau have rightfully pointed out. Next slide. The urban construct, as they conclude, cannot be separated from the events that happen in it. Next slide. Urban space is situational, conditional, and differential. Cities, therefore, reveal themselves through various perceptions and multiple realities, which ultimately can never be controlled or predicted through master planning as a sole means of representation. Cities are informed and imagined by many people and things at a time. They are simultaneously a mental and material construction. Therefore, cities are not just an accumulation of buildings, streets, and avenues. Their existence is embedded in the encounters of individuals that are interacting with each other. Consequently, the form of the city can no longer be interpreted as a fixed location within which movements occur. Rather, cities need to be viewed as transitional entities in which their locale is to be found in the idea of moving points animated by the people who interact with the urban construct. In this scenario, cities consist not just of one place. They are made up of an unaccountable amount of different places with various complexities and time frames that we create and transform while passing through. Next slide. Within this matrix of human rhythms, we simultaneously absorb and decode the urban landscape. Next slide. And by translating fragments of the city into personal snapshots, we create new realities of the urban condition. Next slide. A process by which we produce our own individual map of the city. It is therefore us that unfold the urban environment and vice versa. It is the physical presence of the city that informs our being. That means we are immersed in the urban landscape, incapable of separating ourselves from it. We are part of it, both physically and mentally. No, go back. So while we are passing through, each connection that we make is based on our individual perception of the city. And while we are immersed in taking new snapshots of the city, we bring forward new places, places that no one knew before. Next slide. However, maps of cities that we know reveal a very different reality. They all seem to appear as top-down snapshots that are highly regulated and homogenized in favor of a universal rationality supporting an objective point of view. Next slide. This development is rooted in the cartography of the Enlightenment period, an era which was practiced predominantly in Western cultures, claiming their maps to be the truest of all representation of spatial configurations. Interested in scientific calculation, universal rationality, and objective representation. Mapping in the Enlightenment period was considered an accurate science in which the subject, like place, were treated as homogenized entities, making our personal involvement an increasingly marginalized matter in the realm of map making. A very different approach, actually, to the representation of maps in the Middle Ages, in which maps were understood as an information container, a loci, for many different stories linked to the place represented on a map. That means, on looking at a map, an observer of the medieval world would use his own mental association by which he would use the image to be sent back to the place illustrated on the map. However, from the Enlightenment period onwards, map makers abandoned this very idea of a map as a loci associated with stories, and shifted their attention towards the representation of place as a geographic site in which place was reduced to a territory. And with place no longer perceived as a loci of different stories, the subject as well was took no longer an active part of its creation. Next slide. This led yet to another separation of the subject to its immediate surroundings, in which the individual was rendered as a closed circle with smooth contours to ensure its clear division from its location, while the environment was perceived as a vacuum in which the environment appears as its own bubble, self-contained and largely irrelevant to the self-sufficient subject ruling over the environment. Next slide. In other words, the individual expressed itself as a coherent, consistent, and rational being that lives in a consistent, fixed, and organized environment, both seemingly existing independently from one another. A reality that was also reflected in maps. They represent cities as top-down snapshots as a homogenized and seemingly controlled in a seemingly controlled fashion, in which the act of mapping is understood as a quantitative and analytical survey of existing conditions. Assuming that our life is comprised of factual and rational observations, in this process, the map maker and the map seem to have lost their intimacy in order to create a quantitative and rational maps. Yes, some advances in these techniques have occurred over the last 30 years with the rise of mobile communication devices, satellite and remote sensing capabilities, together with innovative computer technologies such as GIS. Next slide. Examples of these technical advances can be seen in the OpenStreetMapping project or Google endeavors with their global mapping platform. However, the effect of these changes, as J.B. Harley argues, have only created a new breed of arrogance in the field of map making, as still not everyone has access to these technologies. Next slide. But most importantly, these techniques are used as devices of inventory and quantitative analysis to legitimize plans as devices to capture future plans. Consequently, issues of selectivity, schematization, and synthesis remain generally oriented around the same conventions used around 100 years ago, leaving the emotional dimensions of our existence completely out. So here we are, at the beginning of the 21st century, and we predominantly map the city as if it was a static construct that can be quantified through facts. But fact is, the process of making maps, even when apparently objective, like any representation, is not a straightforward process of transferring visual data onto a surface. The map maker is taking an active role in choosing what is being measured and what is being conveyed. The act of mapping is therefore not neutral or passive or without our personal engagement. To represent means to select, to translate, and to transform. This is the very basic level of what one could call mapping subjectivity. That means we are very much involved in the representation of things by our very being in this world. We therefore need to see ourselves not separated from our senses, our subjectivity, our mood, and the environment we live in. They are always together and are only when they are together. And if we follow Nietzsche in this matter, it's the body that senses and feels according to what it is drawn to. That means our subjectivity is an important access through which we absorb the environment and vice versa. The environment can only be absorbed through our various subjectivity, particular to this body and to this life. Next slide. And the way how this works is by being aware of ourselves and being actively engaged with the environment, through which we deconstruct and absorb fragments that we then turn into a stream of snapshots constructed out of the realm of our own subjective point of view. Next slide. We therefore do not live in a closed circle with smooth contours. Our bodily existence need to be understood more like a porous and multi-layered formation with a shifting ensemble of emotional states through which we receive and pass through. That means the geography of a person consists of an unaccountable number of changing subjectivities. Subjectivities that make us transition from one state to another. Next slide. And as we engage with our environment, we not only transition from one state to another, we also reposition ourselves, literally and figuratively. From that point of view, the notion of place may as well no longer be considered independently from room interaction. We experience and define our location by its stabilizing moments, a delicate interplay between two states, that of locating and dislocating ourselves. Next slide. We are therefore constantly in motion, and with us are our emotions. Life, from that point of view, is experienced through numerous subjectivities, modulated and animated by our very emotions as a way of composing and recomposing our very own self, our soul. So making maps of cities is closely connected to our very being, which includes our bodily movement, but also our shifting soul, through which we constantly reposition ourselves as well. But what is an animated soul? Next slide. For that, I would like to turn to Aristotle. For him, the meaning of self and soul goes much beyond the meaning of psyche as we refer to it today. For Aristotle, psyche is not just a study of mind or consciousness or unconsciousness. No, in his book, The Anima, as the title suggests, it's the study of the principle of animation. Next slide. Where he puts into question our very soul-body relationship by asking whether all psychological states manifest themselves as material states through which our bodies transform. For him, the soul is, as our body, an animated being. It is a substance that forms a natural body which is full of life. And since the soul is connected to our body, we express through our body the states we're in. Next slide. That means we pass through many different emotional states. We continue to express different stages of our being, or better, our animated being. But the study of the psyche for him is the study of all animated beings, including those that do not, as we call it today, have a mind. A statement that has been challenged in numerous ways since. Today, this boundary of what counts as an animated being has been moved steadily outward to the point that the object world, or rather objects, are considered of having their own animated powers as well. Next slide. Meaning, objects are also subjects of change, depending on their material potential expressed in, for example, porosity, elasticity, or impermeability. Next slide. Therefore, not only subjects are in constant state of change, objects do also have animated powers. They change as well. Everything then is in motion, in relative motion, so to speak, in which the subject and the object do not exist independently from one another. They are in relation. Next slide. Like the surfer with the wave. So subjects are not only a shifting ensemble of numerous mental and emotional states. They are in a close connection with the environment. They, so to speak, merge with it. Next slide. We are born in interaction out of pattern of interaction. That means we never act. That means we never act in isolation. We're always in concert with the other. That is the environment and or other subjects. People, things, their interactions. Go further away. Go here. Okay. Sorry. We are always in concert with the other. That is the environment and other subjects. People, things, and their interactions are intermixed with each other. The world is therefore continually animated by actors who never work individually but as a whole. Their environment in which we are situated in is therefore not rigid or static, but fluid, or to use another expression, something that is continually in transit. As a result, the world we live in is embedded in a ceaseless process of change, in which we continuously reposition ourselves by transitioning from one state to another. Being entangled with the city's intricate spaces involves being continually immersed in its initiation, the process of becoming. And while we are immersed in absorbing the city, we create new places, places that we did not know before. Cities consist therefore not just of one place. They are made up of an unaccountable amount of different places that each of us continue to create. It is therefore the society in all of its complexities that shape the urban environment and vice versa, It is the physical presence of a city that informs the configuration of a society. Next slide. Cities have always been informed by the imprints that we leave behind while moving through. Imprints that consist of an intricate overlay of different passages with numerous realities and points of views. By translating fragments of the city into snapshots expressed via our emotion, movements and interactions, we constantly create new places of the city. Consequently, such an approach demands a very different kind of mapping methodology. A mapping methodology that is able to catch these changing subjectivities, each in their own way. Next slide. Next slide. While being engaged with the spirit of the city and sorting through various mapping methods of different time periods, it became clear the main concern in finding a different way to map cities was to become less concerned with designing a particular form and a particular space per se, but more about finding ways to incorporate the changing interactions among various forces. Therefore, it was not important to find first a way in which a map could provide an open platform. Therefore, it was important to find a way in which a map could provide an open platform of creating new connections. And second, a different set of graphic and notational systems had to come into play so that diverse and unmappable aspects of the city could be addressed and acknowledged as well. Ultimately, the task was to represent the city and its complexities without falling into the simplistic, as finding a way to provide an infinite series of connections. It was Aristotle who devised such an approach by breaking an argument down into its discrete parts. For him, it was vital to identify the essential traits of things by distinguishing things from one another through the mechanisms of classifying schemes. This paradigm produces verifiable categories of analysis where, after separation, components may be brought back together to form again a unified whole. This long practice mode of thinking, inherent to Aristotle's method, offers the mapmaker an alternative method to approach and to process the urban fabric, in which these distinct components provide the opportunity to reunite the complexity of a city through configurations into larger patterns of form, a tableau for new activities and understandings. Although we will never fully comprehend the entire complexity and spirit of the city in one single moment, we can understand the urban construct through the act of distinguishing it in its various parts. Next slide. In this way, one can enter and depart from anywhere. This is how one enters or moves through the city, with no specific order or hierarchy. You may enter by a main street or a secondary road. You may use your bicycle, a car, plane or ship. The perception of the urban framework is always different, even though the whole may appear as it were the same. Next slide. The City consists of 22 diagram drawings that are divided into 4 operational categories. Next slide. The first category, cosmological ground, represents a ground for the urban intervention. It includes a city's general setting, its geography, and climate. Next slide. The second category, legislative agencies, revolves around the bodies of agencies. Next slide. The third category, named currents, flows and forces, portrays emergent and shifting events and flows. The fourth category, next slide. The fourth category revolves around nodes, loops, and connectors. Next slide. By overlaying the diagram without assuming a specific hierarchy, order, or single organizing principle, a new map of a city appears. Your map. In devising the diagram drawings in You Are the City, the map maker sets up the game board in his or her specific way, not to order, to be determined, or to pre-configure the outcome, but rather to enable new formations of the urban construct. Similar to the map of the naked city created by Guy Debord, a key theorist of the Situationists. By freeing the body from the formalist inertia, the map of the naked city reflects a subjective street-level desire perceptions, depicted in the arrows which represent the spontaneous change of orientation where the subject passes and transforms the environment through his or her perception. What is interesting about this way of map making is that a particular order is absent, as each layer has no hierarchy. Unlike the clear order of a compositional plan, the composition of independently structured conditions, like the layers represented in You Are the City, results in a field of multiple orders and outcomes. That means not only may things occur simultaneously, but they may also merge as new event structures to provoke new interpretations of the city. Maps in this regard are not anymore considered part of a closed system, but a way to become a powerful source through which we can collect urban stories, stories that we create while being immersed in the urban landscape. In this, any order will give rise to a narrative, which will, and that is the nature of storytelling, be ascribed to the very person making the map. Each diagram layer needs to be therefore understood as a silent sign that needs to be discovered by you. A silent sign that appears to be a riddle requiring an answer by you while being immersed in the city. Each diagram layer then, when assembled into a map, records your perception of the city. And to experience a city means to go out and wander. Next slide. The city in this light is like an open sea. It pushes and pulls the transitioning soul along its eddies and currents, and are filled with emerging events as a means to marry the city with our emotional states, through which we compose a continuous map of the city. Next slide. Your city. Thank you.